Salvation is a relationship. Salvation isn't a checklist. Salvation is not no one will get to heaven by what they didn't do. Well, I didn't steal, I didn't commit adultery, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, because the Ten Commandments are framed in the negative, right? No one will get to heaven because of what they didn't do. You get to heaven because of who you know. And that message of salvation, if you're talking about overcoming sin in the context of a relationship with Jesus, oh, praise the Lord, that's liberation incarnate. But if you're talking about overcoming sin apart from a relationship with Jesus, oh man, that's just hell on earth. There will be many people that don't sin in hell. Excuse me, that don't steal, or that didn't commit adultery, that didn't do this and such. But you don't get to heaven by not doing stuff. You get to heaven because of who you now know, Jesus.
Welcome back to Ministry Reimagined. I loved this episode because Pastor Shane is someone who has wrestled with his call to pastoring. He's done so much research on if Adventism is even logical. He envisioned his entire life to be an engineer before he answered his call. I love hearing how his brain works and some of the questions and conclusions he's come to from his research. So stay tuned. How you doing, Pastor Shane? You been good?
I'm doing well. It's been a good summer so far.
I'm curious, as a campus pastor, do you find, I'm hoping you love the students, but do you find it's better during the school year, better in the summer? How do you find the difference?
Boy, there's a whole lot less to love in the summer. I mean, those that are quote here on campus are like in class and gone. There's not much social. It's not a social life, just out. So from a ministry perspective, definitely the school year is better, for sure. For vacation, yeah, it's definitely easier to get. Right. Vacation now, sometimes.
Interesting.
So yeah, just more love during the school year.
I'm so glad you said that. It would have been really sad if you thought the opposite.
No. It's the place goes quiet, and even though there are classes, so that some professors, you can always tell the ones that have summer classes, right? Right. Trying to drag you there. But their students, man, they're hard to find. Go to the calf, ghost town, students here, ghost town. So yeah, school year is definitely the better time.
All of that. Well, you've been at Andrews at PMC for, I guess, as long as I've been here, for 3 years?
3. Yeah, 2023. July 1 was my start.
Wow. Oh, it's been, yeah, exactly. Almost 3 years. That's crazy. Walk us through your journey of how you got here, your time before.
Oh, my journey, how I got here, specifically to Pioneer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
whole journey up to it.
Yeah. So there's parts of it that I'm gonna have to save for another episode. Yeah, but I'll give you some of it. So my call to ministry was back in college, and the how to put it. So my mom was always a diehard Seventh-day Adventist Christian. My dad, not so much. There were definitely times in his life where I think he was serious. There were other times not so much. And guys growing up often, mom is the focus until about 10 or 12 years old, right? And then if you're a girl, often, actually even just statistically speaking, even girls will gravitate towards dad. Because mom is that nurturer from the beginning, from the womb, and then dad's around 10, 12 years old really become important. And my dad did for me too. And so I had no interest. People say, it's the last thing on my list to be a ministry. For me, it was after the last thing on my list. It didn't even make the list. Yeah, I wanted to be an engineer, go to Detroit in those days, in Ford Chevy, Dodge, those were the big three. And I wanted to design cars. I grew up around auto racing. My dad was always into racing. There's always at least one race car on the driveway for me growing up. So that's what we did together. That's what I wanted to do for a living. I was to be an engineer. So school came fairly easy for me. The idea, I didn't like math so much, but I mean, my path was set.
Yeah.
And then so I went to Walla Walla, now university, then college in Washington State to take engineering. And my first day of class proved to be a turning point. I was sitting there before class started. Professor hadn't come in yet. There's like 10 people in the room. And I overhear these people talking about how much money they're going to be making after graduation. And, engineers, Boeing was a big contractor in those days. And you could make, as a freshman or a freshly graduated engineer, you could make north of 60 grand, which in those days, that was good money, It's not terrible money now, actually. And at that moment, it really struck me. I thought, man, that just sounds selfish. Because I grew up poor. I wasn't going to be an engineer for the money. I was kind of a purist. I wanted to design cars. So I thought, well, man, if it's selfish at this side of graduation, imagine what it'd be like to be a selfish professional. Now, that's like a freshman's musings, right? Because I've since met many very generous engineers. So it's not. But in my freshman mindset there, I was thinking to myself, man, is this what it's going to be like for the rest of my life? And the thought occurred to me very clear. Well, if you weren't an engineer, what else would you be? And very clearly the impression came, you should be a pastor. I thought that was the dumbest idea ever.
Where did that come from?
God, because it's certainly, at the time, I probably thought it was the devil, but I just, because to me, ministry, without going too far afield into women in ministry and whatnot, in those days, pastoral ministry was very feminized. It was like only nurturing. You facilitate things, you don't lead things, you don't. And so the idea of male aggression channeled in a right direction was like light years away from touch.
Really? So it used to be the...
Oh yeah. See, the last of the, so this is history according to Shane. Okay, I can't give you chapter and verse, but my impression is that the very masculinized version of ministry, where there's aggressive leadership and top-down hierarchy, that kind of stuff, pretty much died away in the 50s and 60s. And the 70s came and refrigerators turned olive green and people were driving funky cars, and even the church experienced quite a change. And by the time you get to the 80s and 90s, pastoral ministry was just very fun. And which is fine if you're a girl or if you're a guy that's a nurturer, right? And I wasn't any of those things. I was like, drive fast cars, let's go racing, let's swing from vines and trees and, conquer stuff. That's what I wanted to do. And so to me, engineering was a cool way to do that stuff. And ministry, oh my goodness, that would be like a death sentence. So I went to lunch after that class, and I hardly know anybody at Walla Walla campus. I'm a freshman. I moved all the way across the country to go to Walla Walla. And I recognize some guys from my hall. So I go and sit down at the cafeteria at their table, and we can talk about, how's your first day going, blah, blah, blah. And I say, and they ask me, how my day go? I said, funny you asked that. I said, not that I was thinking of changing my major, but if I was going to change my major from engineering, what do you think I should be? Wow.
That was on day one.
That was on day one. And they said, one of the guys, well, that's easy. You should be a pastor. I have fallen into the wrong crowd so quickly.
That's the wrong crowd.
Yeah, this is like, it's like, these people, I thought, okay, they don't even know me. So this is clearly not accurate. But my mom had always taught us that if you sense the leading of the Lord, you should do your best to confirm it. I mean, maybe it is just indigestion and bad friends, but maybe it's real, right? So I thought, okay, 2 in a row. I sense that they sense that they hardly know me. So I wrote a letter. Now, do you know what a letter is? We used to take pieces of paper and we would like write words on them and then put it. Okay. So,
interesting.
Yes, right. I know. No. Have you ever sent a letter?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. So yeah, true story. But I wrote a letter because that's what you did in those days, right? And these cell phones were just coming out. And so I write a letter to some friends back towards the East Coast that had known me for a long time. Well, as long as you can when you're 20 years old. And they wrote back. I mean, it took, a week or two, whatever, but they wrote back and basically said, well, that's easy. You should be a pastor. Because I asked them the question, if I was going to switch. And by now I'm like, oh, no. oh, God, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. Um, but I took it seriously. And so I began 2 weeks of very intense praying and talking to people. I didn't know it was going to be 2 weeks, but I was just starting, right? And so I talked to pastors. How did you know that you're supposed to be a pastor? I said, well, certain skills you have to have. I'm checking boxes. Yeah, I can do that. Sure, I can do that. I can do that. It's fine, you know. And at the end of that 2 weeks, again, I didn't know it was going to be the end of the 2 weeks. But after 2 weeks of doing this, the spiritual pressure was just immense. I mean, I just felt like God was just, his hand was at my back, pushing me to change my major to theology. And I was so upset. I just said, don't. I mean, if you're a girl, great, but I wasn't a girl. And to me, that whole vibe of kissing babies and you just go and visit people and hang out, you have tea, and it was so not me at all.
Hate people.
Well, but at that time of my life, people were not my thing. You know, I mean, I had friends. You know, we go do stuff together. But I mean, if you break your leg, you got another one. I mean, what are you worried about? It was just not empathy was not my major gift in my life. But the spiritual pressure was just sky high, and it was. I remember very clearly. It was a Sabbath. I went down to the running track at Walla Walla, which is up at that time was on the edge of a canvas, and it looked out over the desert. And now there's a bunch of houses. I was on my bike. I started my bike and then the track, and I was just having it out with God. I was angry. I was mad. How can you do this to me? And God just was unread up. Just like, this is what I want you to do. And so finally, and I'm not recommending this, I'm just telling the story of what happened. But finally, I shook my fist at heaven and I said, fine, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. And immediately, I was involuntarily, completely and totally calm. So I go from sweating, red in the face, blood pressure sky high, to it's like the finger of God, just a minute. Precious. And the change was so stark that I actually only got to enjoy it for a few seconds because to me it was such clear confirmation. You know, it was just like, yeah, that's right. That's what I want you to do. I only enjoyed it for a few seconds because then it was like, oh man, so it's true. You know, it's actually true.
You have to change everything.
I have to change everything, and then I want to do. So that was Sabbath. Sunday, the registrar's office isn't open. So Monday morning, I ride my bike down to the registrar's office and change my major to theology. And I endured for 5 years. By calling at that time, it was very clear to theology. It wasn't like necessarily the pastoral ministry, but that's where most theology degrees lead, right? And so I was crystal clear I was supposed to change my major. I wasn't totally clear on what I was supposed to do with it. So I went as a student missionary, which I highly recommend everybody should be, almost everybody. I suppose there's a few psychopaths. It should not be student, but most everybody. I mean, if you're in college and somebody else is paying your bills and you're not attached, go be a student missionary. And for me, it was a powerful experience because one of my questions was, should I be a teacher? Should I be a preacher? And I wasn't interested in either one. But that year, I learned a whole bunch, and by God's grace, some good things were done. And I also learned I didn't want to be a teacher. You know, the whole lesson plan, like day-to-day grind, and that was not me. But I only left one other one, which I wasn't really excited about either. So by the time senior interviews rolled out, because that's some places do it in junior year as well, but for us at Walla Walla, it's senior interviews, and I went to, I forget how many interviews I went to. I think I interviewed with most conferences in my union at that time. But one of them was the Washington Conference. And you have to understand, I had zero confidence that Washington Conference would ever offer me anything because they knew me back when I worked at the conference summer camp. I had long hair down here and was loud and brash and, loud car and that kind of stuff. So these guys, I thought, pretty much already blown me off because there's some of the same people I interviewed with. So I get in the interview, and to me, it's just total practice session. I'm not going to get anything from this. And the ministerial director says, so if you could go anywhere in the Washington Conference, where would you go? And I knew enough about Washington Conference that I knew that a guy named Ron Howerson Jr., who's now the pastor down at Colosseum, the campus church there at Southern, that he was the pastor at a church there in Washington Conference, and that there was an opening there. And I said, well, I want to go to Tacoma Central and work with Ron Howerson Jr. And I'm like, there's no way they're ever going to possibly even consider this, long-haired rebel to go down and do this. And the ministerial director was, yeah. Well, come to find out, there was an OE in there, and Howerson was leaving. So they needed somebody to go there. They didn't tell me that. And then they actually did offer me the job. I said, oh, man, good. This has to be a God thing, because there's no good reason. If I was in their shoes, I wouldn't hire me. Yeah. So they offered me the position there, and then Howerson made his announcement. I was sitting at graduation when I read my first church newsletter, Ron Howerson Jr.'s readers. I was devastated. Because I think he played basketball. I played basketball. I don't know if you know Ron, he's 6'7", and big guy, 5'. So we had fun for a few weeks, and then he left. And you asked how I got here. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll finish with this little snippet here.
Yeah, take time.
What really made me stay because keep in mind, I'm not, I'm still not into this. I'm just following what God told me to do. And I could speak okay. People are being blessed by my ministry in spite of my lack of love for it. And about a year in, conference president comes. He says, "I need you to go to field school." So what's field school? It's like, for me, what? He said, no, it's the evangelism field school. So you'll go and you'll spend a month with an experienced evangelist who does public meetings, tell people make decisions for Christ and to join the church. And at that time in my life, I was utterly convinced that the message of the Adventist church was pretty kooky. Like, this is kind of redneck theology. I'm not.
What part?
Anything to do with Bible prophecy, which is a lot. I mean, that's Adventism pretty big into that, right? So in my mind, I was into the grace of God. I was very much wanting to focus on Christ and grace, and don't bother me with this prophetic stuff. And this is after I had a degree from an Adventist institution. So the truth was, I really didn't know much about what the church believes. I really didn't. I had studied about Christ. That was attractive to me, grace and plan of salvation, etc. But the uniqueness of the Seventh-day Adventist Church was not at all what I was interested in. So this was like the worst assignment ever. I mean, it was. I did everything I could. I said, the Bible says you're supposed to give the guy a year off after he gets married, and my anniversary falls right during that evangelistic series. And the conference president, he just sat there, he just listened. You talk, and he says, "No, he's right."
Oh, see.
All right. Yeah, there was no question of mine. That was. Anyway, long story short, it changed my life. Absolutely changed my life, because the evangelist, his name was Jack Cologne. He's retired now, but he used to conduct what they used to call ninth quarter for the seminary. So seminarians doing evangelistic training, he was their guy. And I didn't know Jack. But I went to these meetings, and to my great surprise, as we're going through these meetings, I am one of the converts.
Yeah.
Which is a little awkward, because I'm getting paid by the church to be a pastor, right? But he used, just using the Bible, he went through all of the beliefs of the Adventist church, which was news to me, because I thought you had to use Ellen White and her writings to support what the church believed. He didn't use her writings for once. It was all scripturally based. And it was after that that I was utterly convinced that one of the reasons I was born, and one of the biggest reasons I was born, is to share Christ in the context of what we call the three angels' messages. Those messages in Revelation 14, which is a message of transformation. Jesus takes anybody right where they're at, but he loves them enough to not leave them there, help them to grow, become people of love or justice and mercy. This transforming gospel that the three angels talks about, it just utterly ripped me. And so I became a 3A zealot, Jesus and three angels. That was, it at last made sense to me why God had called me to pastoral ministry. That was the moment that made it very clear. Not only did I hear God correctly, but I'm in the right place. So, yeah, each move since then has been God saying, this is the next step. But he doesn't say what the next step after the next step is. At least not to me. But
Yeah, it's just one step.
yeah.
Wow. I'm curious because it sounded like, you accepted the call a while before you understood why and before you actually accepted it. You know what I mean? You accepted it, but before you accepted it.
Certainly before I liked it.
Yeah, before you liked it. What were your sermons about if your heart wasn't even fully in it?
It focused on what my heart was in. That was Christ. That was the experience of a relationship with Christ. There were certain portions of Adventism, like the second coming. Who's opposed to Jesus coming back, right? And this is a good thing. So those kinds of things I could do with passion and with power. And I was, after I went to, no, that story happened afterwards. But that's what it was. It was kind of a more generic evangelical thing, and I don't mean that pejoratively. It's free for anybody who's talking about Jesus, but it definitely wasn't having his flavor. It was.
You mentioned it earlier, and you've also mentioned it a couple times. You were born, in your words, a divided home. One you're in the church, one not. What was that? Growing up Flattank, was it ever like a pull to go one way or another, or?
It was. There were times when it was fun. Most of the time, it was a royal headache. When you're a kid, your parents are God to their kid. Even if a kid knows that they're not technically God, they fulfill all the roles that God does. They give you life, give you food, they give you shelter, and they give you wisdom, and they tell you when to turn left and right. Save you from killing yourself by jumping off the roof. All that stuff. So parents are God to their kids, and when God is divided, you have to make some very hard choices as a kid. You don't verbalize them, but you're forced. You don't want to deny that one of your parents is right. You want them to both be correct. And my folks split early on, and then remarried each other, and then split again. And so the norm for me was chaos growing up. And so spiritually speaking, we regularly went to church. My mom always made sure of that. And the earliest of years, Dad would go with us sometimes. And then when I was in my teens, my dad, when I would spend summers with him, he would go to church as well. But obviously that's still divided, right? My stepmother was a saint, and had a couple of stepfathers. The last one of which was a saint. So there's a lot of chaos, a lot of spiritual chaos. And did my dad have a pull on me? Yeah, he did. He very much had a pull on me, because he was that guy driving fast, loud cars, and doing what guys do. And once I hit about 12 years old, my dad could do no wrong until, or really probably until my latest of teens and in my early 20s. So yeah, I grew up in a spiritually divided environment, and it certainly made me his spiritual assistance child.
What made you accept the call from? It doesn't sound like you liked it, but it seemed like you accepted it kind of easily. Like it wasn't really a
easy, like quickly.
Yeah.
So I thought about that a bit over the years. Part of it is because of I think how God wired me to be. So my personality type is not suited for pastoral ministry. If my conference president is watching this, my apologies, but
Too late for that.
yeah, the Myers Briggs, you familiar with Myers Briggs? Yeah, they give you 16 different personality types, whatnot. And there's actually a book. Myers Briggs is so well established that different professions have books that list all of the different personality types and what your strengths and weaknesses will be in that given profession. So there's one for pastoral ministry. And I'd never heard of it until, like, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years, whatever. And so I got the book. I ordered it, and it's not very big, but 100 some pages, whatever. And I start to read it, and there's glowing things for all of these personality types. Oh, you're going to do wonderful. It's to be great. I get to my personality type, and no joke, there's like 2 paragraphs. They're very short paragraphs, and it essentially said, if I was going to sum it up, if you can do anything else, do it. You will not enjoy pastoral ministry. And that was that personality type. One of the reasons why it worked for God's method of calling me is because I have a very strong sense of the value of truth. It's not that I only see black and white. That's not it. Well, there's definitely some things in life that are quite gray, and we just need to live with the question. But the idea that truth matters was hugely important to me for as long as I could remember. When my folks split, that was the truth, and it mattered a great deal. I wasn't going to imagine that it didn't happen. I wasn't going to pretend that it didn't happen. It was like, hell has come to my door, and I'm just going to face it. That's not because I'm some genius or whatever. It's just that's part of how God wires me up to be, and that's what I grew up with. And so when the call came, when that first impression came, like, well, you should be a pastor. If it's the truth, I need to follow it. I need to do that. And when it just got confirmation after confirmation, and finally down at the running track, John the confirmation, it's like, I may hate this, but it's the truth, so I'm going to do it. And I'm glad I did. It took me a while, but I'm glad.
Wow. I was just glad you did.
Yeah. That's probably institutional churches are, if there is a fit for my personality type, probably institutional churches do it. And I wanted to be on a university campus many years before I came here. And in part because this is a place where truth matters. This is where you can debate the truth. This is where you can hear fresh ideas about the truth. And I'm not saying you can't find that at another kind of church, but I do think the campus setting lends itself a little bit more to that. So my wife early on in our marriage realized that it was risky to go to Sabbath school with me. Like if we went on vacation, we traveled somewhere and we went to vacation to a different church, because I love to spar, but sit there. So somebody would say something in Sabbath school. I thought, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So I would push back and say, that's true. I don't know if that's true, because the Bible says, come back and see my wife's like, oh, come on, just be quiet. So in a university environment, you can do that a little more than you can do at other places. So.
Why do you think it's important to do that? Before we get any further, I want to tell you guys about Virtual Staff Network, one of our ministries that makes this podcast possible. If you are in ministry and are looking to do things, but you don't have the resources for them, you want to better use the resources you do have, and you want to refocus your time and what you're actually spending on in ministry, you have to look into Virtual Staff Network. We understand ministry, and we have a team with decades of experience in many different areas in ministry that can help you be consistent and maximize your reach. Let's start with your social media. Let's build a strategy that can help you reach more people, strengthen your community, and make the most out of every sermon, event, and message you want to share. Whatever your ministry needs, go to virtualstaffnetwork.com, join our Builders Club, and let's talk. There's genuinely nothing to lose. Back to the video.
What's the phrase? is the unexamined life worth living? I think that's who said that. Some famous person said that. Worth living. Yeah. Even the Bible says, examine yourself to see if you're in the faith. And so this idea of reflection, of questioning or finding good answers to your questions, to me is extremely helpful. It's very hard to have a mature faith in Christ, much less a relationship with him, if you don't do that. Now, to be clear, there was a time in Adventism, maybe the wider culture too, I don't know, I wasn't aware enough of those days to ask, but there was a time in which questions were considered to be more important than answers. I think that's a sure path to chaos and depression. Because if all you do is ask questions, maybe it was a rollover from the 1960s and people were, coming off of the authoritarianism in the 1950s. Because my college life was important thing is to ask questions. And I was all for it. Yeah, let's ask questions. Let's challenge the status quo. But when I did get answers back, I thought, well, okay, some questions don't have answers, but some of these do. Some of these are really important questions too. Can God be trusted? Is there a female that will come into my life that I should marry? I want to know the answer to that question, right? That's a question, right? Can I pay my bills? I don't need, don't tell me, maybe. Let's find out, right? So it's been very helpful for me to grow in the theological judo done in a Sabbath school class. That's great, And I have what my wife has been very, some people get married because they can be a blessing to their spouse. And that was certainly true for my wife. She has been a profound, refining influence on me. And I've learned to not be quite as aggressive in Sabbath school when we go someplace. So this is good. But I have learned so often you learn more from people who disagree with you than those who agree. It just happens that way. It can be scary sometimes, particularly when you're talking about core beliefs. For me, the good news is that, like after that evangelistic field school, that I detested at first, but then just changed the light, I found that what Adventism was teaching was extremely solid. There were some things that we still don't know the answers to, and that's fine. If God chooses to reveal it, great. But I learned that for lack of a better way to put it, the fundamental beliefs of the Adventist Church were rock solid. I put them to the test. I took what I learned from Jack in the series and just went to town. And I came out on the side of that, man, I can trust this. This deserves my allegiance. God deserves my allegiance.
What made you decide that from it?
It's actually very easy to test. I shouldn't say it's easy. It's simple to test a worldview. Does it have internal consistency? Does it agree with itself? Okay, so if somebody says, well, I'm a blue frog, and they say, well, tell me what blue frogs believe, and they say, well, they believe that 1 + 1 is 2, and that 1 + 1 is 3. Okay, I immediately know that they don't. There's going to be this is problematic. I don't want the blue frog. Okay, but if a worldview has internal consistency, it lines up with its suppositions are borne out by further evidence in using the lens of that worldview. That's a real vote in its favor, because honestly, that's hard to come by. We live in a fractured world. It's chaos. And so when you find something that has internal consistency and then is confirmed through reliable means, whether that's as simple as somebody's life is changed by it in a positive way long term, or you dig up something in the sand in the desert, the Middle East, that confirms that, yeah, Jesus was here. This story actually happened when you find it. When you find internal consistency, it makes logical sense, and there's confirmation both inside and outside of that worldview. You found something. And to me, Christianity, and of course for me, Adventism in particular, meets that criteria very well. And I'll tell you what, and this is one where people talk about the emotional side of being religious. It's totally true. There is definitely an emotional component.
What does that mean?
Well, in other words, if I never came to the place where I had emotional attachment to my calling, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. because it was sheer duty, right? It was just I valued truth, and this sounded like truth, so I'm going to pursue it, right? But if I never had the emotional component of I personally investing my life in this, where I laid roots down in this system, it's pretty hard to stay. There's really not a compelling reason to. And honestly, it should be that way. A worldview, a way of viewing the world should make a difference, right? It should, and to my way of thinking, it should make you a better person. People should be better people because they know you, and it should make ultimately it should lead to God, the ultimate ground of all being. It's Carl Warner, that than which nothing greater can be conceived. It should lead back to that, to God. And so for me, the worldview and its internal consistency and the emotional component to it, this department I'm very honest about. My life was chaos for a long time growing up. And when I found by God that I couldn't predict his actions, but I could predict his character, it was very stabilizing. And honestly, for me, that's what we're created for. We don't find our place until we find a God. And so the reason I bring that up is because some people say, well, really it's just about emotion. You get people riled up and they need a home and they need a hug. And so they go to Jesus. They get both of those things. If that's all there was, I would agree with those critics. But because there actually is just some pretty straight logic and it all matches up very, very well. And the literary evidence and the archaeological evidence and the sociological evidence and the historical evidence just is overwhelming. When you match that with the fact that coming to Jesus is coming home. That's why I and billions of other people have stayed. Because this is where we're supposed to be. It's where we're made. So it was a long journey. There's no doubt about that. But it is glad. I'm going to get to I'm glad.
What part of that hit home for you?
Well, I think because I didn't have much of a home growing up. For me, nobody's home's perfect, which I didn't know for a long time. I thought mine was awful, and I shouldn't say mine was awful. Yeah. There were happy times, but when God divorces you, when your parents separate, it's the ground you shakes beneath you. For years, and it never goes away. If somebody is sitting here, if somebody's listening or watching right now, and they're married and they're considering getting divorced and they have kids, just remember, every family reunion, every Christmas, every holiday for the rest of your kids' lives will be marked, and that's a generous word to use. It'll be marked by that reality, even this day. My stepmother is the only remaining one of my parents alive. The rest of it all passed away. Like I say, she's the same, and we love to be able to see her and get to visit her. And even in those joyous times, we all know, we all understand that life is very different than it originally was planned to be. Even as we enjoy what a Christmas or Thanksgiving together is a mark. And so when I say coming to Jesus feels like home, I suspect that when we get to heaven, that it'll be that sense of hope that will be just so solidifying. May not have been able to put words to it ahead of time, saying, "Oh yeah, this is where you're supposed to be." So yeah.
I love that. Thanks for sharing those.
Sure. Yeah.
I am curious because you've mentioned you love the debates, you love the questions and the answers, looking for all this stuff. What do you think is the biggest
conversation or question that a lot of people are, I guess, battling with when it comes to Adventism or in the church right now.
But like for Adventism particularly, or for like
Just in the church, I guess.
Puritans, or because it does vary quite a bit.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way?
So here at Andrews, and this is true to my experience in visiting other Catholic schools as well. This is the place where it's not so much question about Adventism; it's a question about life. It's you and I did a podcast once about the hard questions, that questions why is there evil in the world, why did this happen to me. Those are much more the questions that I get on campus here, and some of them are just as basic and as important as how do I know who I'm supposed to marry? How do I know what job I'm supposed to do? That's kind of the order of the day, right? You're in college. That's the least part of what you're doing here. Those are college age questions that happen. They're really important, and I love having the opportunity to talk about those things. When I go outside of that, in the wider Adventist church, I think probably the biggest issues are about church governance, church authority, the writings of Ellen White, her use of sources, and let's see, women's ordination comes in occasionally, not as much as, at least not in the U.S. as much as in the neighbors to other places, and the nature of Christ. One of my professors told me that the nature of Christ is on a 10-year cycle. So if you missed it this time, just wait 10 years and it'll come back.
What does that mean?
Oh, excellent question. I'll try to make this brief. Basically, the question comes down to is, was Jesus our... no, it's going to be too long. Let's make sure.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So the first 400 years of the Christian church, so well before Adventism or most anybody else, were spent trying to figure out what Jesus was. Okay, not who Jesus was. They knew he was the Son of God. That was clear. But what was Jesus? What was he human? Was he divine? Was he both? And if he was, what does that mean? And so for 400 years, and basically in the end, they created a few new vocabulary words and marched on. If it had been me, out of sheer boredom, because we debated this for centuries, right? And so to me, Christ is a divine mystery. Was he human? Yes. Was he God? Yes. I don't know how that works, and I sleep well at night. I'm okay. So I don't need to know the answer to that. It's a holy mystery, and my guess is even after we're in heaven, we will still not understand it, because I don't know how that works. Anyway, so the debate comes in if you believe that Jesus was more on the divine side of things, then his example for us is not necessarily one that we can reach. So he never sinned, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're called to overcome sin to that level as well. If he was more human, in other words, had Adam's nature after the fall, okay, but lived a spotless, sinless life, now he's our example, and we must do the same. And depends on who you talk to, how much God is involved with that and how much you're involved with that. Shades of perfectionism come in with that. And it's a big debate. Last generation theology is a phrase, I don't know if you've heard that. There are different interpretations of what last generation theology is, but the basic idea is that at the end of time, there will be a group of followers of God that will not sin. And this is where you get to the shades of it. Some say, and they will know it. They will be consciously aware of their sinlessness before God. They use Ellen White's phrase that at the end of time, God's people will stand before God without re-ear. And they take that to me as because they will be consciously sinless. The challenge with this issue, of course, is that it can be very depressing to people depending on how you present this topic. I don't appreciate very much the focus on the nature of Christ as the core of this argument. I don't think it's helpful. If you can't fully understand the basis of the argument, how can we possibly hope to come to the right conclusion? And so if you can't fully know what Jesus was, let's just be satisfied with what we do know. He was God, Bob's clear about that. He was man, yeah, Bob's clear about that. And we're just going to have to stick to the mystery, that's okay.
What the Bible is clear about is that transformation is possible and should be pursued in a relationship with Jesus, with all the energy that Jesus and I can muster. And the reason why I'm so focused so heavily on that relationship side is because if you take that relationship out of there, it's just legalistic garbage, and you will have times of elation. Oh, you'll be perfect, and then sure enough, you'll mess up, you'll do something dumb and sin, and you'll come crashing down. You can only do that for so long. You can only go tune before you get either depressed or you just get out. Just like this whole God thing, I'm not there. So the debate to me is troublesome because of the debate and the terms that often frame it. I would much rather say it all starts and continues and ends with Jesus. It's this relationship with Christ. Relationship is not a set of facts and figures. It's maybe supported by that. But what sets Christianity apart from every other major world religion is that Christianity is a relationship with a living, breathing God that has not only the capacity, but the zealous desire to know personally each one of his creations. And in the context of that relationship, when you realize that not only did he make you, but he bought you back. He died on the cross. Instead of us dying for our sins, he died for us. You can now trust this person to now bring about the transformation. And let's just go back now to the old terminology, to overcoming sin. This is a great thing. If you're addicted to alcohol and it's messing up your life, and you come to Jesus and you accept him, and then an elder pulls you aside and says, you know what? Jesus is really good about like if you were on meth, he could help you with that. If you were like a kleptomaniac and you kept stealing, he could, but alcohol, man, sorry, Jesus doesn't help for you. So you're stuck. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if there was any habit that God was stumped by, and somebody comes to Jesus and they're desperate to get out and they want help? Well, praise the Lord, there isn't one.
Right.
And so to me, this is the joy of sanctification. This is the joy of becoming more like Jesus. And if there's not some element of joy in overcoming sin, you can be sure that there is more that you do not know. Doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong. It could mean you're just beginning of something, or you're growing in your relationship. But at some point, if you're seeing Jesus rightly, you will sense the joy of leaving sin behind. Now, here's the thing. My understanding of the Bible is that at the end of time, the same conditions will apply as are present now. So in other words, the whole idea of last generation theology, there are portions of last generation theology that I think are marvelous in that they pay attention, that most last generation theologians pay attention to the fact that God wants to set us free from sin. Sin is selfishness, sin is darkness, sin holds us back from full relationship with him, a full relationship with other people. Why wouldn't we want to let go of it? Why wouldn't we want to be free from it? And so I am grateful for last generation theology people that call attention to it. What I wish they would do more of, and this is not all of them, but some, is that they come back to the essence of what Jesus says salvation is. John 17:3, Jesus is speaking. He's praying to his Father. And he says, and this is eternal life, that they may know the one true God and Jesus Christ who has sent. Salvation is a relationship. Salvation isn't a checklist. Salvation is not no one will get to heaven by what they didn't do. I didn't steal, I didn't commit adultery, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, because the Ten Commandments are framed in the negative, right? No one will get to heaven because of what they didn't do. You get to heaven because of who you know. And that message of salvation, if you're talking about overcoming sin in the context of a relationship with Jesus, oh, praise the Lord, that's liberation incarnate. But if you're talking about overcoming sin apart from a relationship with Jesus, oh man, that's just hell on earth. There will be many people that don't sin in hell. Actually, that don't steal, or that didn't commit adultery, that didn't do this and such. But you don't get to heaven by not doing this stuff. You get to heaven because of who you know, Jesus. And it's in that relationship that we are transformed, we are changed, and it's at his speed. You know, we can contribute with all the enthusiasm. This is why people say, what do you do with people that really are concerned with the law of God? My first question is, well, do they know Jesus? They have a relationship with him? Because if they don't, oh man, this person needs help. Can you help? Pray, do something, go talk to the person, right?
Yeah.
You know, but if they know Jesus, now we're not seeking to keep God's law to be saved, because we've already been saved.
Yeah.
We're saved in Jesus. Now we have the privilege of keeping God's law because we have been saved. Now, because it's candy, and now it's candy. What stood against this before is now candy for the soul, and you have sweetened mouth and sweetened belly, and where we can become the people that deep down inside we and God always knew we could be. People of justice and of mercy and of love and of kindness and of goodness and respect and dignity and honor, all through the grace of Jesus Christ. So you asked what the major burning issues in the church were.
Yeah.
And the nature of Christ actually that's the basis of that particular thing. That's where I wish it always ended, was where I just ended it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a big thing. I think that's even something we covered before when I remember we did an episode on the Adventism bubble, and you said a quote about relationship
Oh, relationship without rules.
leads to rebellion. Yes.
But see, actually, I think it was the other way around. I think it was rules without relationship
Yes.
leads to rebellion.
Yeah.
Yeah, relationship without rules leads to chaos. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, ask anybody who's dating. There has to be some rules, right? So yes, both of those things are true, and certainly true when it comes to relationship. Yeah.
That's good. I do want to ask on that, because you mentioned the 10 Commandments. What do you think is the importance of emphasizing the 10 Commandments when you said that's not what's most important? It's not about what you didn't do.
So we emphasize them because they're a reflection of the heart of God. Yeah, and in that context, absolutely, emphasis should be made. It's when they get broken off from that. This is why, you know, they're to this day and on and off for the history, at least of the United States, there's been debate in politics, should you post the 10 Commandments in public schools? And even just recently was one of the southern states. They had a big debate about this, a double one. And they used to be in the United States, every school, religious or otherwise, public as well, had copies of the 10 Commandments in it. And the argument was, well, this is basic morality. Natural law, John Locke, etc., you know, is in line with it. And the answer is almost. Because the first 4 of the 10 Commandments are not part of natural law. Only about tangentially you might be able to make an argument for it. But really the last 6 of the 10 Commandments, you know, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't, you know, this kind of stuff. Most cultures in the world have some sense of most of those rules. And so the fact that there are 10, as soon as you divorce virtue from its source, you start to run into trouble. You may not run into trouble immediately, but the source of virtue is Christ. God is, there is no, if morality is only done by majority vote, somebody's going to get eaten for supper, eventually. Maybe you've heard about what democracy is. The democracy is 3 wolves and a lamb voting what's for supper. Okay, so majority rules, right? And the United States is not a straight democracy. You know, we're a representative democracy. We're a republic, which is a very different thing. But the idea of determining morality by majority vote isn't good. And there needs to be an outside objective source, which I believe to be God. And so if you emphasize it in that context of a relationship with Jesus, absolutely, all 10 are very good. All 10 are very good to emphasize. But it can't be to earn your place in heaven. It's not something you can't do. It's impossible.
What is a question that churches should be focusing more on?
So my question may sound a little cynical, but be assured that they're not. There's lots of good churches out there. There's also lots of churches that aren't so hot, including the Adventism. And sometimes it's not because we're idiots. It's sometimes just because we got for rut. Sometimes there's divisions that happen that are out of people's control. COVID happens, messed up a lot of churches, you know.
So I think the questions are we Christian? Sometimes my prayer for myself is, Lord, I want to be a Christian. Help me be a Christian. The real thing, not, I want to be fake, I want to be whatever, just tell me to be a Christian. And, as a church, are we Christian? For a Seventh-day Adventist church, are we Seventh-day Adventists? Do we even know what that means? If you took the Sabbath out of the equation, would there be any difference in our message between us and the Baptists or the Methodists or the Evangelicals or whatever? And if there's not much of a difference, is there supposed to be? I would contend, yeah, God went through a whole bunch of troubles to create one last movement to do a certain job or to say certain things. I think churches need to ask, why aren't we planting another church? Adventism used to be just understood. And for the first 80, 90 years of Adventism, that's what Adventism did. You planted a church that will plant and plant. And if you're a pastor, you didn't stay with the church. You were a church planter. You were an apostle, basically. And in the West, at least, we've almost completely left that behind. And it's killing us. It's killing us. So yeah, those are a handful of questions.
Yeah. What would you say, I guess, is the importance of planting more churches?
So if the human race never had babies, we would be dead within its generation. So I think my math is right. Yep. And the same is true for churches. The church is referred to as the body of Christ. And so I think God intentionally chooses this biological analogy because there's so much that bears on that reality of being the body of Christ. We were meant for multiplication. And so if I won't do this for very long, but I'm going to leave the Bible and denominational and religion for just a moment. Sheer statistics. If a group of people, sociologists have done research on this up and down, and it always comes back the same. If you're not actively recruiting people, and if you do not have a message that is sufficiently different from the other things around you to recruit those people with, you will die. It's just a fact. So let me come back to the church now. We actually have a good message. It's true. It's not just good. It's true. It actually makes sense, and it can change people's lives for the positive. And church planting brings with it the entire package. Here's what I mean by that. If I go next door and do Bible study with my neighbor, and he becomes a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, loves the Lord, loves the Bible, but doesn't have a church to go to, okay, for whatever reason, let's just imagine this, right? Statistically, his odds aren't so great. Just like if you have a baby and you put that newborn baby on a curb somewhere and drive away, the odds are not very good that baby's going to survive. We were meant to be in relationship with other people inside of the body of Christ. That's God's plan from the beginning. If you don't keep planting churches, you are basically telling the rest of the world, we're not going to break Jesus to you. Goodbye. Hope you make it. Churches that are planted, instead of just doing Bible studies, I'm a big fan of Bible studies, but if you only do Bible studies and you don't plant, then the geographic growth will not happen. You will not reach other places in the world. Because the only reason that I can go to a church on Sabbath morning is because somebody 170, 80 years ago planted a church, who then planted a church, who then planted a church, who then planted a church, and finally planted this one. That's how the kingdom grows. So if you want to grow a little bit, don't plant churches. You can have Bible studies and baptisms, but you'll eventually just hit your peak maximum for that building, that place, that location. If you wanted to have a global movement that reaches the world, you have to plant churches.
Interesting. If you are a leader of a church organization, a school, conference, union, or any other ministry, I'm going to be blunt, but how do you make decisions? We all know today's world is changing so much and so fast. How do you know what's right? Should you use AI or not? And is that based on your own feelings, opinions, perceptions, or based on your information and understanding of your organization and your processes? At VSN Agency, we specialize in organizational intelligence. So go to vsn.agency, let's partner with you and help you get a map of your organization to navigate through these dynamic times. Go check it out, and let's get back to the video.
I planted one church on my own, I say on my own. I'm very few people actually. My church is quote on their own. I took 12 people from the mother church in north of Seattle and planted the church. And then I've been not the guy on the ground, but a key part of the years-long prep work and core team development for 2 other church plants along the way. So yeah, there's 3 that I've been either the guy or right alongside it. Yeah.
How come that wasn't your, I guess, goal?
Or what?
Okay.
That's not what God sent me. Yeah. Well, so where I'm at, I love the people of Pioneer. We are great people at Pioneer Memorial Church where I'm the lead pastor. So let's all be clear about that. Right. Pioneer is abnormal. And anybody who's been around for a while and is honest to God knows that. We are an institutional church with 3,800 members. Most churches aren't like that. Most churches have less than 50 people that attend it. So anybody that goes to Pioneer that's had any sort of exposure to the rest of Christianity knows we are an oddball. Don't try to be Pioneer. You have to have an institution. You have to have thousands of people around you, and that's not. The apostles did not set out to establish big, huge institutional churches all over the world. I think a lot of people kind of look at a huge church and they say, "Oh, the kingdom has landed on earth." And actually, we have problems that other churches don't, that are real liabilities. And smaller churches can be, they don't have to be. Pioneer can be almost as agile as these smaller churches. But let me just ask you, how many 500-pound gymnasts do you know? Even if it's all muscle. Okay, not very many, right?
Yeah.
Right. Who do you mostly see? It's flipping the Olympic gymnasts. Yeah, they're 5 feet, right? They're out there flipping around and jumping all over the place, and it's amazing to watch. But there's a reason for that, because sheer physics does not give the 500-pound gymnast much of an opportunity, right? I would be at the entry level for the NBA, maybe at 6'4", right? Maybe somebody might actually think of me. I apologize, but if you went to the WNBA, they're probably would. No,
I think it's so take me.
yeah, I know. I understand. So so there are constraints, right? There are physical constraints, and there are there are spiritual constraints.
Yeah.
The church in Jerusalem after Pentecost was massive, 3,000 people. If you read in, it's clear in the Bible too, but I think Ellen White consolidates it very well. She says, I think it's Acts of the Apostles, page 105. We could be wrong about the page number, but it's in Acts of the Apostles, I know for sure. About that church in Jerusalem. God allowed persecution to come on the church in Jerusalem so that the believers will be scattered across the world. They didn't want to leave. They had the original apostles. Man, how can you beat the apostles? These are like the original guys that walked with Jesus. They're the greatest speakers in the world. And they are having potluck every Sabbath together, and they're sharing their possessions. It's heaven on earth, right? And God says, no, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. Let me send some soldiers, and we're going to break this party up because you all need to plant churches and go all over the world. And basically, she says that the apostles were in danger of being satisfied with what had already been done. Today we have another name for it. Today we call it settled pastors. Most people don't know that phrase, but if you study anything about Adventist history, it's often used. Settled pastors are pretty much what we have in the West. They're pastors that stay over churches for 3 to 7 years. Very little, if any, church planting. And usually it's a chaplain role. You marry, you bury, you put out fires, you chair in committees, give some Bible studies, and then you move on to another church and you do it again. Unfortunately, that leads to pastor dependency. And if you ever want to have a fun Sabbath afternoon, what would you type in? You can type in settled pastor. If you go to a search engine for all of the Spirit Prophecy, right, Isabella White. And if you go to GC website, it includes some other historical documents too. Type in settled pastors, church planting. What's a good word to use for that? Starting new churches, and the thing she has to say about settled pastors and congregations that require the services of a pastor are just astonishing. They are jogger. Basically, don't do it. And if she says in one place, in the book Evangelism, I want to say it's page 702. Might be off on the page number. Basically, if the church requires the services of a pastor, they need to be baptized again. Now think about that. If you need to be baptized again, it's because either you weren't serious the first time or you have left Christ. That's the only reason that we do rebaptisms. And she said the church needs to be baptized if they require the services of a pastor. How come? Because we're supposed to depend upon Jesus, not upon a paid pastor. And so God disrupted the early Jerusalem church and sent them packing around the world. That's why Christianity, by the time of Paul's ministry, Paul could say, every creature under heaven has heard the gospel. Now, it's a little bit of hyperbole. There were still some creatures that hadn't heard, otherwise you'd be ahead by then. But Adventism started out that way, and we became the fastest growing Protestant movement that the world had ever seen. So there's huge advantages to church planting, and most of the world does it, but not so much of the West. So in Australia, United States, Canada, Europe, yeah, we're encouraged that we need to start planting.
Okay. That's interesting to hear from an institutional pastor in such a big church at PMC to say that you're not really for an institutional church.
So that's a question I get asked all the time. I used to do seminars on this topic across the country, talking about church planting and pastoring on dependency. And by the way, I think it's one of the reasons also why God picked my personality type. So my personality type was terrible for the tradition of pastoral war. And so God knew that there was no danger of me ever becoming a traditional. Yeah, yeah. Even aside from theology, it's like, nope, you broke your leg. Keep living on the other. Anyway, yeah. So it is true. I get that asked that regularly. So how can you say that you're against settled pastors when you've got 8 pastors on your staff? Okay, so the answer is twofold. Number one, early Adventism understood that if you didn't settle your pastors over institutional churches, chaos will reign. Because of the transitory population, students come and students go. Professors often will come and go as well. So if you're going to have continuity on campus, you have to put somebody there who's going to stay. And it's dangerous. So in other words, you're almost saying, I was going to say it's like telling somebody they have to smoke, but that's too strong. Because there are dangers, right? Yeah. That if I preach on Sabbath morning and somebody finds it to be pleasing, and they come, the only reason they come to Pioneer is because they want to hear me speak. Or whoever the star pastor is or whatever that comes there. That's dangerous. That is dangerous stuff because you will put your dependency almost unconsciously onto a human being when your dependency is supposed to be on Christ. And so, it's not just Adventists that have this trouble. I mean, it's a human problem. We want heroes, right? We want
People do that for basketball teams.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The body of Christ is supposed to be different. And so this is a concession to have me and 8 pastors on staff here. Because this is not normal. And we have to be careful lest we make people unduly dependent upon us. A church planter has an advantage because they're starting a church from scratch with the understanding that they will be leaving it. So Central America, South America, wide portions of Africa, they do this much better than we do. Much better. Although, I want to be clear, there are dangerous trends in some portions of those places I just mentioned. I'll be very clear about it. I travel to those places, and I remember one place in particular, I won't say where it was. They said, Pastor Shane, I am so pleased because I just got a new assigner. It's going to be at a church. And I think they said it had something like 300 members or something like that, which for their part of the world, that was huge. And there was some attachment to an institution. And he said, it's just like he. And I think I know I surprised him tremendously. I said, I'm sorry to hear that. I said, you know what? I said, if the Lord has called you to be there, then that's where you need to go. I said, because that's the only reason I'm at where I'm at, because God specifically said, this is the place I want you to go to, so I did. I said, so if God's calling you to be there, but you must understand, don't be like we are in the West.
because our growth rate is terrible. Our growth rate compared to your growth rate is sickening. There, in most places in the developing world, growth rates are either reasonably steady or they're going up.
Why do you think it's different from?
One of the huge things is because some cultures support pastor dependency more than others. So in the West, we value, and it's not that the old world doesn't value education, but often in the West, we glorify it, right? You know, and so if you're super smart, then we want to be with you. And so the whole idea of a superhero pastor, I think the West is much more susceptible to that disease than the rest of the world is. The rest of the world also tends to not be quite so individualistic. The identity is found more through the community, through the tribe, through the clan. And so the idea of having a smaller subset, culturally speaking, is more natural. In the West, we tend to be very individualistic, and we prize the entrepreneur. And if we find one that we like, we stick with it and model after and whatnot. And that leads to pastor dependency. So if you take the average church, okay, I won't take a specific part of the world. If you take an average church in the West and you compare it to the average church in the rest of the world, where they don't have anywhere near as many settled pastors as we had in one, and you compare the amount of lay ministry that's being done, ministry by church members, Bible studies being given, a series of meetings being held, health ministry being done, interstate work, we pale in comparison. The level of volunteerism is significantly lower in the West. Why? Because we have professionals that do it. And if I'm a layperson and I see a professional, I mean, that they've been trained to do this, he or she's a pro. I mean, I guess I'm just going to sit back and watch. Spectatorship is a huge problem. And so that's why the West is not, that's one of the core reasons, I believe, why the West is not growing, where it's declining in many places, and why the rest of the world is doing very well.
Because of spectatorship.
Yeah, because they believe in every member a minister more than we do. So anybody wants to argue about that, I will gladly sit down. We'll talk about that, because that's an argument they will lose. At that, I will take all comers. It is a statistical fact. Now, it's not to say the rest of the world doesn't have any problems. Sometimes retention of new members is a problem in some of those places. So I'm not saying that they have it all down pat, but I am saying their level of member engagement in ministry puts ours to shame. And until we get over our addiction to settled pastors in the West, it's probably going to stay that way.
I want to know, this will be our last question to this episode. Maybe there'll be next one, who knows? That'll be your fourth time. That's crazy. What is something you want to say to those people just to be into, or they just finished the seminary, they're about to go into their pastoral worlds and their lives in ministry? What is something you would say to them?
Boy, again, I'm stuck because I have too many things to say. Yeah, the seminary asked me to come and do chapel for like 2 years ago.
Okay.
And so I gave my top 12 suggestion. So I couldn't think of 3 or 4. The top 12. So we went fast. We got down 25 minutes worth.
Interesting number.
Yeah, so we did the top 12 suggestions. So all that is to say,
There's a lot, yeah.
yeah, there's
Say all of it.
well, yeah. Yeah, I wonder, so can I be terribly practical, one, and then I'll say something that's a little bit more gentle. So there is, in some of the intellectual circles in Adventism, particularly circles that orbit around higher ed, there has been a renewal of discontent over Ellen White's use of sources. And what I'm going to say next, I'm saying it as Shane Anderson. I'm not saying it as an employee of this conference or pastor or on behalf of any group. I do sit on various committees, but this is just me. There was a generation in Adventism, boomers and those that were close by, and chronologically, that were told, in essence, not all, but most, were told that Ellen White, when she wrote her material, wrote from a completely blank slate every word dictated by God, from God's mouth to her pen, literally, like every word in there. Ellen White never claimed that. In fact, she claimed the opposite. There were times when Ellen White used sources, much like Luke did in the Bible. Not everything that Luke wrote was his own. The reason why is because Luke was a good historian. Luke knew that other people had already written some accounts about Christ's life, so he borrowed those. There are no copyright laws in the first century AD, so no, we carry.
Yes.
Generally speaking, most scholars understand the book of Mark to probably be the earliest of the four Gospels that are written, and the other Gospels clearly borrow from him. And Mark appears potentially to have borrowed from an earlier source as well. Inspiration is not determined by whether you are original. Truth has been constant since the dawn of time. And so God has written things down to other people, some of which are in the Bible, some of which are not, but it doesn't mean they weren't inspired. And so when it came to the writings of Ellen White, there were generations of Adventists that were told her writings were dictated from the mouth of God to her pen, and she didn't use any sources at all, and it was just complete. Well, that's not true. She didn't claim it. If you read the introduction to the book, Second Selected Messages, so not Selected Messages 1, but book 2. If you read the introduction there, it is eye-opening to a lot of Adventists. She's very clear about how inspiration works. Inspiration from God means that God, as best we can tell, because this is a bit of a mystery, right? This is God talking. What is that? Well, does they speak Spanish? I've been told they speak Spanish. Speaks English? Yeah, so we'll find out. God inspires writers with ideas. And Selected Messages of Volume 2, she specifically talks about the Bible writers, that God the writers of the Bible were inspired by God with ideas, and then they chose the words to write those ideas down. In her own ministry, she describes the same thing, and if she strayed too far with her word selection, the angel would guide her back. In other words, we don't believe in verbal inspiration. I mean, 10 Commandments, yes. Okay. But for most of the Bible is not inspired every single word. Now, is it the inspired word of God? Yes, in the sense that God inspired those ideas to be written and approve of how those writers wrote them down. Does it mean that God speaks English or Spanish or Japanese or German? No. He speaks the language of heaven, whatever that is, right? And I'm sure it far outstrips the grammatical capabilities of English or Spanish or German or whatever. Today, that generation is part of me understands it, part of me doesn't, is trying to resurrect that argument. And I would just encourage anyone who's graduating and looking to go into ministry or whatnot, don't be distracted. Yes, Ellen White used sources. It's okay. But if the Bible writers can use sources, Ellen White can use sources too. The copyright laws in the 19th century were somewhat similar to the ones in the first century. And so it was not illegal. It wasn't that she was cheating. It wasn't that she was somehow doing something nefarious. She was doing what the good writers of her time did and using sources that were approved by heaven to put into her books. Now, that's not to say that comprises the majority of her writings. It's actually a very small portion of her writings that she uses other sources for. But that is until this group of thinkers is off the stage, this is probably going to be an argument that anybody going into ministry is going to have to be up to speed on. So I would just encourage them to educate themselves and to not be discouraged, nor to, as far as is within their info, to allow church members to be unnecessarily discouraged by this. Ellen White did use sources. We're totally open about that. It's on the Ellen White Estates website. You can go there. It's written. So this kind of thing is there. And do not be dissuaded that somehow do not be persuaded that somehow that diminishes her gift. The Bible tells us there's nothing new under the sun. That means that in a very real way, everything I preach is old news. Maybe I put it in a way that for this particular group of people is new. But ultimately, we're all borrowers, because ultimately all truth is a person. Jesus said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And then later he said,
I am the way, the truth, and the life. So we're all borrowed, and we should not let that persuade you. So that would be one very practical thing that I would say before into ministry. I guess the other thing I would say is absolutely do not be a solo pastor. Your conference may assign you to be over a church. You need to respect their authority, so you take that as something. If the Lord calls you to be there, that's where you need to be. But you make your congregation as unsettled as it can be. There are good people in your pews. There are people there that can do parts of ministry much better than you'll ever be able to do it. You need to find those people and find their skills, and by the grace of God and hard work and sweat, help them to get engaged with Jesus, number one, and in ministry to help other people to know Jesus, number two. Be faithful to the Adventist message. If you don't know the Adventist message, I mean, I graduated with a degree in theology and I didn't know. It was not clear in my mind, I had learned that afterwards. If you're not clear on it, do whatever it takes to become clear. I think it's the greatest message going on planet Earth right now. And I'm giving my life to it, and we'll give the rest of it to it. If you're bored, you're missing something. Don't let it happen to you. Just be relentless. Drive forward in the love of Christ and help your people to become what God has asked them to be. And don't let them depend on you to do the stuff they should be doing for themselves. I could say much more.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I love that. We're going to need a book from you on everything that you've learned over the years.
Now was a bad time to ask me about writing a book. Because there's two outlets. Life is full. Boredom is not one of my problems. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Maybe someday. Yeah. I've had a draft sitting on the shelf for years, talking about years. I passed over to see it, whatnot. But so far, I've only written one. Well, no, I take it back. I've written one full book on Adventist education, and that's back in '09. And then I just finished a book for 2027. Now I say I wrote it. Let me clarify here. This General Conference is doing a it's called One Voice, giant global evangelistic initiative for 2027. Eric Kohler, our new GC president, excellent idea to once again help our churches to get involved and engaged in helping other people, reaching other people, helping them to become Christians, become ready for the second coming. And as part of that, there's a global sharing book, and that's what I had a part in. It is going to be. Everybody talked about the Bible books of Daniel and Revelation should be published together with minimal commentary, so that the average person on the street can read them, at least have some understanding. And that has not been done very often in the church, and so this is a chance for the global church to put some serious horsepower behind doing that, because there's going to be millions of this book that are. So I didn't write Daniel and Revelation. God took care of that with other people, but I did write the commentary for it, which was probably one of the hardest writing assignments I'd ever had. But that is completed now. It's the reason why it was so hard. I guess in your order.
Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Yeah, is because of its how short it had to be. They wanted the publishers, understandably, the people who read are less on the planet, right? We just don't read as much as we used to. And so the book is going to be about 100 pages, including the text of Daniel and Revelation. So maybe half that or so for commentary. And knowing that I have a very short amount of time. Daniel was a little bit easier because it's small, because there's a lot of story in Daniel, right? Lion's den, fiery furnace, all this kind of stuff. It doesn't require a whole lot of commentary to understand it. When you get to Revelation, well, and if you get to Daniel 11, I mean, there's some, even talking about the sanctuary, Daniel 8, I've never worked so hard to have so few words, just trying to choose the right ones. And by God's grace, I pray they will be. But that comes out next year, 2027.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Stitching it up.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what the titles can be, but maybe just Revelation.
Well, we'll find it. We'll find it. I'm sure they'll put a lot into the marketing for it, so I'm sure we'll see it. It's good. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I
Thanks for having me.
enjoyed hearing some of your story and how you got here and what's important for you in the church. It's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. If you liked this episode and you want to support this podcast, and maybe you even want to hear a part 2 with Pastor Shane, like the video, comment so we know what you think, and subscribe so you can see more. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.